So it ended up another of these strange talks, which was actually not planned. So the idea was that Steph wanted to do something about open source, and so we came into a discussion, and I remembered about a book that I actually found years ago, which was quite nice, and this is the presentation that came out of it. So it's about infinite games and open source. So some ESUGs in the past, we already had a book presentation, or better, a book suggestion. So someone made a mini talk of 10 minutes like, this is a cool book, you should all read it. And this was actually this one here, Sub, about management. And it was actually quite good. So I tracked it down afterwards, read it. Very nice book. And back then I thought, we should actually have a book session at ESUG. It's a nice thing to have. And today, we will actually have some kind of book session again. And it's actually about this book here. So it's called Finite and Infinite Games. It was published in 1984. And I first actually had it in my hand back when I was a student, and we were doing the German Greek Association. Markus Gailey came to Karlsruhe, and we were doing all the stuff for that, and he actually had this book with him and gave it to me at that point, and I actually read it. But it was kind of, I think, a bit in the community back then known, and it comes, I think, originally from this community of the whole Earth Catalog people, which we will later see. So it's a very strange book. It's philosophical to some way, a bit odd towards the end, but it's a very interesting book, and it has a very interesting lesson to teach, I think. And there are lots of people who actually are great fans of that. For example, Kevin Kelly, who is actually from the whole Earth Catalog original team, and he said that the wisdom of that book informs most of what I do in life. Very nice quote. And what it is all about. So I will not, of course, give you a full introduction into the book, but I will just take the main idea as a starting point. And so the book says that there are at least two kinds of games in existence. One which is finite, and the other one is called infinite. And the finite game is actually the game that we know as a game. It's a game that is played for the purpose of winning. And it's finished when someone has won, as we all know of games. But then there is this notion of an infinite game, which is played not for the purpose of winning, but for the purpose to continue to play. The book is a bit more than that. It builds out a life philosophy out of that. It gets a bit odd at the end. But it's actually a very interesting way to look at life, or to look at what you do in life. Like Kevin Kelly said in some interview, it resolves my uncertainties about what to do next. It's very easy, always choose the infinite game and not the finite game. And this talk takes kind of only one small thing out of this, and it looks at open source as an infinite game. For one, I will look at it for two perspectives, one for the individual and two for the company. So for the individual, it's quite interesting. And here we have some stories that Steph had for the original presentation. You see that sometimes individuals inside of our profession actually have some kind of problems. So for example, there was this story that someone worked years and years inside of a company, but the company failed. All the people got fired, and there was nothing happening anymore. But like it already is, this non-functioning entity had all the rights to everything. So there was nothing that out of these years of work was actually available to the people that were doing it. A bit similar, the second story, where you have a successful company. Because it's successful, some other company says, yeah, we will buy you. So that means we get a big company K that takes company Z in. But some months later or years later, the big vision of that bigger company changes. The project doesn't fit anymore. And all the years of work will actually be just stopped. And for me, this means that for the individual that is working in companies, it often feels that the work that you do is just a finite game. So you do something maybe for years, you put all your work into it, but then it will be just stopped and it will not continue. And you do not have the power to actually turn it into an infinite game. So the thing is, try to not actually do that. Try to not die with the company or with this small project inside of a company. And I think that actually contributing to an open source community is actually one way of actually putting some kind of infinite game into your play. On the same way, if you look at companies, I think there's actually a whole book that one could write about this. I think it does not exist, which is odd. So you could make a company philosophy that you actually should choose infinite games and that your company should be an infinite game. For example, if you look at the typical thing that you always have in the business books, if you look at Toyota, they have these things that every person on the assembly line is allowed to stop the production, which is very odd because you think as a normal person at first, no, we need to optimize that as many cars get produced that day as possible and we fix all problems later. But that's actually trying to win a finite game, and the idea of putting a self-halt into the system and fix it now is actually the infinite way of looking at things. Or that it used to be in the 90s when the big car companies were actually outsourcing quite a lot. There was this philosophy that you could actually win a lot by pushing the price as far down as possible, with this idea if you get the company that produces parts of your car to lose money, then this is immediately a win for you. But Toyota does it differently, so they actually, when they get a company to produce parts for them, they will actually send a team there that will analyze if you actually make money still. So if they find out that you actually got the contract because your price is so low that you will actually fail, they will not actually take you, which is a very interesting way of seeing your company not as something where you win all these tiny games, but where you actually build something for the big. So this would be actually a nice business book, I think. So if anyone wants an idea for writing a book, that would be, I think, very fun. And a tiny part of that is actually open source. I think that actually, even for companies, open source can be a source of going towards the direction of playing an infinite game instead of just a finite game. This is not a talk to convince you that everything should be open source. There are talks like that, and people can make this argument very nicely, but this is not about that. But I think that even in a company that is not about open source at all, open source can actually have a role, especially for this infinite game aspect of things. Especially if you think about your company's big vision might actually be an infinite game, but for the single person or the small team in your company, it doesn't feel like that. When you have to cut the project because it doesn't fit anymore in your vision, like we saw in the examples before, it will feel to the single people involved as if all their work is actually for nothing. So in that sense, open source can actually be quite nice to improve the morale of your company and to give people more meaning in the long term. And a very important aspect of it is, of course, finding talent, which is astonishingly difficult. So for one, if you are inside a community, it's much easier to find experts, and it is much easier to find future colleagues that can actually fit into your company, that can fit with the other people. And here we have the third story that Steph found. So there was a company that looked for a CTO, and they actually hired someone because the CV looked really, really good. But they actually did not at all know that person and what this person did in the past. And therefore it failed. And the kind of what they should have done is to actually look a bit deeper. What does that person really do? What did that person do in the past? Maybe even look at the achievements of that person in the sense of the code that they produce. And this is much easier in a community and in an open source community. The other part is retaining talent, which can be difficult, so it's very hard to find people, but it's hard to keep them. And retaining talent can be can be nice, for example, to allow people to contribute to a community so that they actually have something that is bigger than the project which might fail that they are working on. So, an infinite game is played for the purpose of continuing the play. And I think that open source is one example of these projects that have this property of being an infinite play. And you should think about being part of that, because nobody can play a game alone. Thank you.